Hello, my name is Sean Reynolds. I am the owner and managing broker of Summit Properties Northwest here in Bellevue, Washington. This is a quick walkthrough video of how you fill out Form 21 of the Northwest Multiple Listing Service form. And I'm recording this for you as of November 22nd, 2023. And we are looking at form revision as of July of 2023. So you want to make sure that you have the most current version of the form. And this is meant as informational purposes only. If you need additional information, make sure you hit up your managing broker or hit up an attorney. That's always a good option. Let's jump on in. Here we go.
You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
All of these forms, they have an additional manual that you can look at. So when you go to the Express Forms library, you pop open Form 21. Over to the right here, you've got manual on Form 21. And that's what we're looking at here. So for each of the numbers within our form, we'll scroll down. Here's Form 1. It's got date, and then it's got notes on it for you. So each of the major forms is going to have basically additional instructional material that the MLS has provided for you. This form, the MLS wants you to know, is for just a single family property. So for the other forms, for use number Form 28 for vacant lot or land, Form 25 for multifamily properties, or I'd probably mix that up. Vacant land is form number 25. Multifamily properties is 20, or manufactured home is on leased land is on Form 23. So just kind of make sure you've got that right form. Let's get back into it. So on the date, that is today's date, whenever you were writing up the contract. Okay, the MLS number, you will grab that off of the listing. Pretty self-explanatory. If you don't have one, you can leave that blank. It's okay to leave that one blank. Offer expiration date. You know, that can be whenever you want. It could be a month out. It could be a day out. It could be whenever you want that to be. There's additional instruction on that as well. You've got the buyer's name, typically first and last name, so you can identify who it is we're talking about. Then you've got status. Status would be married, single. You've got a handful of drop downs, limited liability. Just make sure you've got the right entity for whatever it is that is going to be purchasing. If you've got something other than just a regular couple of people thrown in there, right? Seller, you got the seller's name. You'll take that off of the MLS listing. Make sure you confirm that with the tax records as well. All right, does this match up? What do we got going on here? Legal description, put in the tax parcel number. You've got room for 3 of them here. If you need additional tax parcels, then you can throw that on an addendum, a Form 34. Here you've got the address. You've got the city, and this would be house number and street. And you've got the city here. You've got the county here, state here, and zip code there as well. Included items. These are items that you want to stay with the property. Go ahead and check off any that are applicable. You can also confirm that with the listing. They'll typically have kind of a breakdown of appliances, and maybe they'll say something in the agent's only remarks that indicates, all right, this stays with the seller, or we're willing to give this up as well. You can look for that additional information. And then if you have something you don't find here, or something beyond the list that they have in the form, go ahead and check the kind of the optional box there, and then write in whatever it is that you want to remain with the home so that your buyer can take possession of that after closing. Purchase price, you're going to put in a numeric value here. Say it's $1 million. You're going to go 1 and then hit enter, give you $1 million. And then you can go $1 million. Just go ahead and write it out. Earnest money, put in the figure there. $5,000, $10,000, whatever that is, get that figure in there. And then the delivery date. Typically that's 2 days after mutual acceptance. And don't forget, on any of these items, we can go back and date. You've got a bunch of instructions here. So if you are just looking at this as a quick reference for Form 21, you kind of know what you're doing. You don't necessarily need to go here. But the first time you write up a purchase and sale agreement, I would definitely look at the Form 21 manual. I'd look at the manual on every single form so that you've got just a little bit more information. So here, like on the MLS, you've got insert the MLS listing number for the property. All right. That's pretty self-explanatory, right? So for reference only is not a material term of the agreement. And here you got information on the offer. You got withdrawals of offer or counter offers. So you kind of got, even though it's just this one box that you're working on, you've got additional information that the MLS provides for you here that is really important and is really handy to have as you're going through it that first time when you just don't really know, okay, what goes in each one of these boxes, because it kind of seems it's a little bit overwhelming at first, but after you write a couple of offers, you'll get in the habit of, okay, this is what goes here. So we're down to item number 7. That's the earnest money. That is not the down payment. That is how much skin in the game your buyer is going to have. So if they default and can't get out on any other contingencies, if your buyer defaults, depending on what you're going to write up for hey, what happens when things go sideways, that is the amount of money that's in play that the seller will get to keep. So that's $5,000, $10,000, $50,000, $100,000 if you get into the upper end properties, but it's typically $10,000, $20,000, somewhere in there. And then that is negotiable. You can talk with your buyer, whatever they're comfortable having at play. That is the number that they're going to write a check to and hold it for with escrow. And so then that leads us into the earnest money to be held by the buyer brokerage firm. If your brokerage firm wants to keep the earnest money in-house, that's an option. But most of the time, you're just going to have the closing agent. You're going to click that closing agent box, and you're going to have them hold it, meaning maybe you're using Chicago title. I'm just throwing something out. Chicago title and escrow. So you would have the buyer write the check out to Chicago escrow, $10,000. You can call them ahead of time and say, hey, I've got an deal coming through. Need you to open up escrow. We're going to write this out to Chicago title. Is that fine? And they'll give you instructions. All right, here's what we want you to do. Or in the form of a promissory note. You can check that box as well. Here's what happens if the deal goes sideways. You got to check only one, which is forfeiture of earnest money. It's what the vast majority of buyers want to, that's the box that they're going to check, because then that just means, all right, we're out. If we default, we leave on the table our $10,000, whatever it is in earnest money. And the other option is seller's election of remedies. Typically, they're going to sue your buyer. Something along those lines. So forfeiture of earnest money is what is in the vast majority of purchase and sale contracts. But on any of this stuff, check with your managing broker if you have any questions at all, because this is literally meant for informational purposes only. Title insurance company. That differs from the closing agent. So I mentioned Chicago Title earlier. Oftentimes these companies will be big companies. Chicago Title is huge. They've got Chicago Title and they've got Chicago Escrow. So it could be Chicago Title and Escrow, depending on whatever the company, how they run their business. You would type in Chicago Title here, and you may have the name of the contact person that you want at Chicago Title to handle your transaction. And then same thing here, closing agent. Think of that as escrow company. So that would be Chicago Title and Escrow. And you put the same person's name here. Now that you can have two different entities do these functions, but it's so much easier to just have one title company and that be the same as the escrow company. But you do you, right? I mean, whatever it is. And by you, I mean your buyer, however they want to go down these roads, as long as it's legal. Then the next box we've got is item number 11. That is the closing date. Oftentimes you will see a closing date on the listing. If you want to give that to the sellers and just go with that date, that's fine. Otherwise, you can propose your own closing date. Hey, we want to close it on this date. Okay. You put that date in there. Possession is typically either on closing, or you click that and go closing +3, closing plus a month, whatever it is. Maybe you put a date in there, whatever it is that you negotiate or your buyer is hoping to get. All of this stuff is you're just basically writing up as your offer, which is the first lob that you send to the seller. Maybe the seller signs off on everything and you're at mutual agreement, but oftentimes there's going to be multiple negotiations on any of this stuff. Any and all is available. Services of closing agent for payment of utilities. So I recommend that. Your managing broker may say, no, I don't want to do that. And then you can waive it. But it's so handy because this means the escrow company, basically they get the utilities squared away at closing. And so your buyer has a fresh start with putting the utilities into their name at the time of closing. And then you move on from there. You don't have to worry about the seller's bills, which lag oftentimes, coming to you. And, hey, I thought you were paying this at closing. Nah, remember we waived it. So I recommend doing the requested. And then if you do that, you attach MLS form 22K. And that's the form, if you've looked at it, it itemizes all of the utilities that, your water, your sewer, your gas, any of those basic municipal charges that you might have coming. Okay. So charges, assessments levied before, but due after closing. Those are assumed by the buyer or prepaid in full by seller at closing. If you are representing the buyer, you're going to want to have that prepaid in full by seller at closing, unless there's a real reason you want your buyer to assume those charges. What are those charges again? Say you're in a development, or there's some kind of charge for the development. Maybe it's a local improvement district. It's some kind of charge that's being attached to the home, and you want to get that closed. You want to get that paid off before your buyer takes possession. I hope that makes sense. All right. Seller citizenship. This is the FIRPTA form. So the seller is or is not a foreign person for purposes of U.S. income taxation. This is a fairly recent clause within the purchase and sale agreement. And all that means is if your seller, oftentimes the seller on the additional forms on the listing will have the FIRPTA form, because it's kind of just one of those, it's a standard form. And so your seller is a foreign person, and this is for withholding tax due to if people skip the country and the U.S. government wants to get their money for tax purposes. So it's basically a tax form. You just have to fill out correctly. All right, which one is the seller? You can always go back and correct that one. But you could also call the listing agent and say, hey, we have any issues on this if there isn't a FIRPTA form on the additional addendum on the listing. We've got information verification period. This is, you check that and go expires 5 days after mutual acceptance, whatever that is, or satisfied and waived up front. You can do either one of those. And that is just to give your buyer some additional time to go through and check out that all the stuff that the seller has represented is actually accurate. Agency disclosure. So the buyer was represented by probably you, the buyer broker, or you've got dual agent as an option, or you've got unrepresented. Check whichever box applies. Same thing for the seller. Who was the seller represented by? Typically the listing broker. You check that box. Here's a new, number 17 is a newer line within the purchase and sale agreement. This is the buyer brokerage firm compensation. So if it should be under SOC on the listing. You'll see SOC and you'll see somewhere maybe with 2%, 2.5%, 3%, you would go ahead and put that in there. And if something differs, like if it's a flat 10 grand, 20 grand. You could put that in there. You can also go pay as offered, which is, hey, there was 3% offered on the listing, or go other and do an addendum. And this was a result of a big lawsuit that has been ongoing for years and years. And the National Association of Realtors, along with Compass and Keller Williams, were involved. We've recently had, that's the $1.8 billion lawsuit, lawsuit that recently came about. This is the MLS. It's their way of kind of circumventing, hey, we are providing full disclosure on commissions and we are not colluding to keep commissions up. You can go ahead and negotiate commission there. You can take the commission that the seller offers. Again, if you have questions on that, and if you don't have a selling office commission on your listing, on the MLS listing you're looking at, check with your managing broker. That is what they are there for. So since we're talking about managing brokers, Summit Properties Northwest offers an 80-20 split. We do no desk fees. We are not a member of the National Association of Realtors, and we have a low annual cap. And we also pay for your errors and omissions insurance. We add you to our policy. So at Summit Properties Northwest, we have basically no fees that you will incur on a monthly basis. And so you can put money into marketing yourself. That's kind of the angle that we go with. All right. The addendum here is you just go ahead and you can do the drop-down menu. All right. And they go by alphabetical order. Throw all of those in there. So, okay, we got financing 22A. We need to do this one. Okay. We've got 22D, optional clauses. Put all of those in that are applicable. All right. And then what you're going to do is you're going to have your buyer sign and date when you send this offer over. Obviously, all this information is going to be blank. If you do put in the MLS number at the top of the form, a lot of the seller's information will pop up automatically, like listing brokerage firm, the MLS office number. So put in your buyer's address, fill out this information, fax number. Yeah, who does fax anymore, right? It's all via email. Get the buyer's phone number, email address, the brokerage firm. That's the name of your firm along with your office number. You can look that up in the roster in the MLS. You can put in buyer broker. That is you. You are the broker for the buyer. MLS lag number. That is for the buyer broker. That's your lag number. So the firm phone number, that is for us, that'll be Summit Properties Northwest. The broker's number, that is your telephone number. Firm fax number, you can throw that in, but again, who faxes, right? Firm document email address. So for Summit, we have a single email address. It's offers@summitpropertiesnorthwest.com, nw.com. We have all of our information go there. I filter through that. My office manager looks at that and categorizes it accordingly and stores it accordingly. All right. We've got the buyer's broker email address. Put that in there. Buyer broker DOL license number. That is, you can find that at the DOL, or you should know it. It's your department licensing number, right? And the firm department licensing number. You can look that up on the state's website, or call your managing broker, or call somebody at your front desk if you have one, whoever handles your admin. Same thing with all of this side. This side over here is for the seller's information. And then we go into a bunch of verbiage regarding kind of a bunch of the standard clauses. You've got title insurance. If you want to do something other than the standard title policy, you'll want to fill out Form 22D. That's the optional clauses. That gives you the ability to do the enhanced title. Most people don't want to do that because it involves extensive additional things such as a survey, which are very expensive. And for the vast majority of transactions, you don't need that. But again, either check with an attorney or check with your managing broker if you have questions on that. So read through all of this, the information here. Get to know that so that when you look at this, you are able to explain to your buyer, because you're going to have a buyer somewhere that is going to put you through the grinder and ask you about every single one of these. So not only is it your job, but somebody's going to ask you somewhere, hey, on section G of Form 21, number what do you know about this? And if you have a working knowledge of what that is about, you're going to be so much better off than, I'm not really sure, I don't really know. And the best thing to do is you're going to have a lot of situations where you don't know. Go ahead. And what I always tell my brokers is, okay, so you don't know, you don't have a clue. What do? You know what? I've got an answer for you, but I want to make sure that it's correct. Let me write that question down. Let me check with my managing broker, and I'll get right back to you with what I can confirm as the real answer. Is that okay with you? And people are always going to go, yeah, I want you to get the right answer because this is the biggest investment of my life. Don't screw this up, right? I mean, it's fair enough. All right. We go into section 1031, like exchange. If you are getting into that, you will need a facilitator, which is an attorney that can legally handle the whole process of the 1031 exchange. Go into a number of additional just basic stuff on the purchase and sale agreement. And that's kind of what we're working through. Here's some additional explanation on the default. We checked to that in the very kind of beginning of the purchase and sale agreement. You've got an assignment. Again, go through all of this information, have a basic cursory working knowledge. But for all of these items that we're looking at here, you're not going to need to fill in anything. So you get to the bottom of the page, you're going to probably do either a DocuSign or maybe an AuthentiSign within the MLS. You're going to have your buyer's initials there, and then the sellers are going to sign off when you get to a point where they're comfortable signing off. And yep, we're accepting that page as part of the purchase and sale agreement, and they're accepting all the terms. And here at the very bottom, we have got down to W, X, and Y. Those are all the kind of tail end things of the purchase and sale agreement. Okay. So mechanics of this is Form 21. This is just Form 21. I have people ask me all the time. So Sean, what do we do? How do I know which forms to use? So I'm going to walk you through super rough basics. What I recommend doing is get Form 21 up, or if it's a condo, get the condo form up, vacant land, whichever one it is that is applicable. Start with Form 21, kind of work your way through that. If you need Form 22K, which is your utilities, start by throwing that one in. Is your buyer going to need financing? Are they making this contingent upon financing? The answer is typically yes. Then you're going to throw in Form 22A. Any situation that you need to handle, and you'll want to walk through somebody who's experienced with the form set in order to do this. All right, we got Form 22K. All right, what about lead-based paint? If the home is older than 1978, got a lead-based paint addendum disclosure that you're going to want to throw in there. Maybe you want to do the Form 22D, which has the title insurance option, plus 22D also. Look at that form. It's got a number of things like, hey, we need the seller to, hold the property together in similar condition that we see it as now, the buyer seeing it as now. We want the property condition to be the same, if not better, when we get it after closing. You're going to want to be able to address those options. You use Form 22D for that. And there's all kinds of forms. And so if you look at the form library, the list just goes on and on. And so let's go back just for a second, and here's the form library. So Form 22A, financing, a lot of these forms you don't need on making the offer. And that's why when you do your first purchase and sale agreement, even your second, your third, your fourth, and your fifth, you may have situations come up where you're like, man, I don't really know how to handle this. Have your managing broker review it. They're supposed to review everything your first year in business anyway. Plus, it's just not a bad idea. Have somebody, maybe it's a coworker, it's another broker in your office. Send it to your managing broker. I do that all the time. Hey, send it to me. I'll review it on my phone. I'll send you, via text instructions, the changes I want you to make, things I want you to consider, things I want you to talk over with your buyer. Have somebody that's experienced so that you're not acting in the form of an attorney, which you are using these forms. So again, if you go off road, if you start creating clauses and things in here and you're not an attorney and you don't do this for a living day in, day out as an attorney, don't change up the form. The forms are designed to fill in the boxes. Don't do anything more than that. And if you do have questions, I want to check, I want to cross this out and I want to go with something else. Ask your managing broker. You've got evidence of funds, say it's a cash transaction. You've got all kinds of different things here. Maybe you've got the home inspection. You want to make this contingent upon a home inspection. Throw that form in there. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be working through all of these forms. There's a video for all of the major forms out there already on the Summit site, I believe, but it's been quite a few years. And I'm in the process now of updating all these forms. So that's why as of November of 2023, I am going through and redoing all the forms videos because there's been enough changes. I talked about some of the more recent changes. There's been enough changes where I felt like it was important for people to have an idea of, okay, this is a more recent video kind of walking me through items that weren't necessarily like the force majeure and closing addendum. We had that come up during COVID, which was basically if some kind of act of God happens, what happens with the transaction, right? So that came up and that has been used for years in commercial, but recently in residential, we started putting that in the purchase and sale agreement because nobody knew what was going to happen with the pandemic. And we kind of went down those roads. And so once you get all of your forms together, what I would highly recommend doing is do it via AuthentiSign. You go through Transaction Desk in the Northwest Multiple Listing Service, figure that out. There's a bunch of videos, learn that, take some classes, whatever you need to do, get familiar with Transaction Desk, because then you can have all these forms in that transaction and you can have them digitally signed by your buyer. And it's just so much easier than you printing these off old school, taking them to your buyer. Hey, can you write here? Somebody forgets a signature. All right, I got to drive the half an hour back to my buyer's work and have them sign it. Do it via AuthentiSign or whatever digital signature you're going to use. But the AuthentiSign is integrated with the MLS. So write it up that way. Get together a strategy with your managing broker, whomever is going to be reviewing your deal. Get together a strategy for how you're going to approach this, because this is going to dictate how you write up the offer. None of this is rocket science, but it does impact the overall terms of the transaction, and it can impact them greatly. Remember, 9 o'clock is typically the cutoff point on any given date. So if you have financing contingency that expires on XYZ date, know that you either need to respond and get something in by 9 o'clock p.m. on that date, or there's a chance that the seller says, maybe it's a building inspection. Hey, you need to respond by 9 o'clock on the 21st. And if you don't, you respond at 9:02, the seller can say, tough luck. That contingency is, you already waived it by default. So know all of your timelines as well. Get your strategy together. I know you're just filling in boxes, but what these boxes are is super important. And again, I really stress, this is the largest investment that most people will make in their lives. So you want to make sure you've got, no pressure, right? No pressure. Oh my gosh, I got to fill out all these boxes. I don't know what I'm doing. No. That's why you do a dry run, take it to somebody who knows what they're doing, have them look it over closely. Be there with them physically if you can, because then you can go, hey, what about that? I had a question on that. This section of this portion of the purchase and sale agreement. Walk me through what your thinking is there. And if you're not comfortable with whom you're working on the form, find somebody else. There's gonna be somebody somewhere that's gonna be able to help you out. And I act as that person as the managing broker in my office because I want to have my brokers be able to reach out to me. And oftentimes we do it via text or email or whatever, sometimes by phone, but it's just so hard, tagging people down to, hey, can you take a phone call right now? But we do that as well. All right. That's going to be it for me. Again, Summit Properties Northwest, 80-20 split, 0 desk fees, low cap. We make it really easy for you. Check us out if you like. I also do a real estate podcast that's called Seattle Real Estate Podcast, and I host News for Reasonable People. It's kind of some interesting stories that are out there that other forms of media don't cover. Thanks again for watching this video. I'll catch up with you in the next one. Bye for now.